November 9th, 1989. Just after 6 p.m., a government official walked into a press conference in East Berlin. To most people, it seemed like another ordinary briefing. No one expected history to be made that evening. No one expected one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War to collapse before sunrise. And no one expected that the chain of events would begin with a simple question. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall had divided a city, a nation, and millions of lives. It was one of the most heavily guarded borders on Earth. Concrete barriers stretched for miles. Watchtowers stood over a deadly strip of land. Armed guards patrolled day and night. Families were separated. Friends were cut off from one another. And anyone who tried to cross illegally risked imprisonment or death. For 28 years, the wall seemed permanent, unbreakable, a monument to division. Then, in a matter of hours, everything changed. No army invaded East Germany. No revolution stormed government buildings. No leader ordered the wall destroyed. Instead, a confused official made a statement on live television. Within minutes, millions heard his words. Within hours, thousands flooded toward the border. Border guards panicked. Government officials scrambled for answers. And before the night was over, the wall that had divided Europe for a generation was effectively gone. But to understand how a single mistake could trigger one of the most important events of the 20th century, we need to go back to the ruins of World War II. Because the story of the Berlin Wall did not begin in 1989. It began in 1945, and the seeds of its fall were planted long before anyone realized it. In May 1945, World War II in Europe came to an end. Germany lay in ruins. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. Millions were dead. The Nazi regime had collapsed. The victorious Allies, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, faced a difficult question. What should happen to Germany? The answer seemed simple at first. Germany would be occupied and divided into 4 zones. Each Allied power would control its own section. Even Berlin, the German capital, would be divided among the victors. But beneath the surface, a new conflict was already emerging. The wartime alliance between the Western powers and the Soviet Union was beginning to break apart. The United States promoted democracy, free elections, and market economies. The Soviet Union promoted communism and centralized state control. Both sides believed their system represented the future. Neither trusted the other. What had once been allies were becoming rivals, and Germany sat directly between them. As the years passed, tensions grew. The world entered a new era, an era known as the Cold War. Unlike World War II, this conflict would not be fought primarily with armies on battlefields. Instead, it would be fought through politics, ideology, espionage, and the constant threat of nuclear war. Germany became the front line. By 1949, the division was official. The Western zones became West Germany. The Soviet zone became East Germany. Berlin remained divided as well, a democratic island surrounded by communist territory. The city became a living symbol of the conflict between East and West, and soon, millions of people would vote with their feet. Life in East Germany was not the same as life in the West. The government controlled much of the economy. Political opposition was restricted. The secret police monitored citizens closely. Many East Germans became frustrated. But there was one major problem for the communist government. People could still leave. Because Berlin remained divided, East Germans had a loophole. They could travel into East Berlin and then cross into West Berlin. From there, they could start a new life in the West. At first, only a few left. Then thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. Young workers left. Doctors left. Engineers left. Scientists left. Teachers left. Some of the country's most educated and talented citizens were disappearing. By the late 1950s, East Germany faced a crisis. More than 2 million people had fled. The government was losing the very people it needed to survive. Communist leaders knew something drastic had to be done. If the exodus continued, East Germany's economy might collapse. Then came a decision that would change history. A decision made in secret. A decision that would transform Berlin overnight. In the early hours of August 13, 1961, soldiers moved into position. Police blocked roads. Workers rolled out barbed wire. Construction crews appeared across the city. Berliners woke up to a shocking sight. Their city had been cut in half. Families found themselves separated from loved ones. Neighbors who had spoken every day suddenly lived in different worlds. Streets ended at barricades. Train routes were severed. Doors and windows facing the west were sealed shut. The border was closing, and it would not reopen for decades. What began as barbed wire would soon become something far more intimidating: a massive concrete barrier, the Berlin Wall, and for millions of people, it would become the defining symbol of a divided world. The Berlin Wall was never just a wall. It was a warning, a message, a declaration that anyone attempting to leave East Germany would face the full power of the state. Over time, the barrier became increasingly sophisticated. Concrete slabs replaced simple fences. Watchtowers rose above the city. Powerful floodlights illuminated the border at night. Guard dogs patrolled restricted areas. Armed soldiers watched from elevated positions. Between the inner and outer barriers lay a deadly zone that became known as the Death Strip. It was designed for one purpose: to make escape nearly impossible. The East German government insisted the wall protected its citizens from Western influence. But few people believed that explanation. After all, walls are usually built to keep people out. The Berlin Wall was built to keep people in, and despite the danger, many still tried to escape. Some dug tunnels beneath the wall. Others hid inside vehicles. A few attempted daring escapes using homemade aircraft, balloons, or elaborate disguises. Every successful escape became a symbol of hope. Every failed attempt became a tragedy. One of the most famous incidents occurred in 1962. An 18-year-old bricklayer named Peter Fechter attempted to climb the wall with a friend. As they approached freedom, border guards opened fire. His friend managed to escape. Peter did not. Wounded and unable to move, he fell into the death strip. For nearly an hour, people on both sides watched helplessly. No one intervened. No one rescued him. By the time help arrived, it was too late. His death became one of the most powerful symbols of the wall's cruelty. Stories like Peter's spread across the world. They reminded people that the Berlin Wall was not merely concrete and steel. It was a human tragedy, a barrier that separated parents from children, brothers from sisters, husbands from wives. For millions of Germans, the Cold War was not an abstract political conflict. It was something deeply personal, something they lived with every single day. And yet, despite the suffering, the wall endured, year after year, decade after decade. By the 1970s, many believed it would stand forever. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. A story of growing through. To maintain control, East Germany relied on one of the most extensive surveillance systems in modern history. The organization responsible was known as the Stasi. Officially, it was the Ministry for State Security. In practice, it was the eyes and ears of the government. The Stasi monitored phone calls, opened mail, tracked movements, collected information on ordinary citizens. At its peak, it employed tens of thousands of officers and relied on a vast network of informants. People never knew who might be reporting on them: a coworker, a neighbor, a friend, sometimes even a family member. The uncertainty created fear, and fear created obedience. Many East Germans learned to be cautious, to avoid political discussions, to keep their opinions private, to trust only a small circle of people. But surveillance could not solve every problem. The government could monitor citizens, it could control newspapers, yet it could not change one simple fact. People could see the difference between East and West. Television signals crossed borders. It could restrict travel. Visitors shared stories. Images from the West reached millions. Across the wall stood a world that appeared more prosperous, more open, and more free. The contrast became impossible to ignore. While East Germany claimed to represent a successful socialist society, many citizens increasingly felt trapped. And as the years passed, Frustration continued to grow. The government remained powerful, but the foundation beneath it was beginning to crack. The leaders simply couldn't see it yet. By the 1980s, the Cold War was entering a new phase. The Soviet Union, once a superpower feared across the globe, was facing serious challenges. Economic growth had slowed. Government inefficiency was widespread. Public confidence was declining. Then, in 1985, a new Soviet leader came to power. His name was Mikhail Gorbachev. Unlike many of his predecessors, Gorbachev believed reform was necessary. He introduced new policies aimed at increasing openness and restructuring the economy. The reforms became known as glasnost and perestroika. To many people across Eastern Europe, they represented hope. If change was possible in Moscow, perhaps it was possible elsewhere as well. But East Germany's leadership disagreed. Its aging rulers resisted reform. They insisted everything was working. They claimed their system remained strong, and they refused to acknowledge growing public dissatisfaction. The gap between the government and the people widened. Meanwhile, change was spreading across Eastern Europe. In Poland, a powerful labor movement challenged communist authority. In Hungary, reforms accelerated. The old order was beginning to shake. Then, in 1989, something happened that would dramatically increase pressure on East Germany. Hungary opened part of its border with Austria. For East Germans, this created an opportunity. Thousands traveled to Hungary. Many crossed into Austria. From there, they continued into West Germany. Suddenly, East Germans had found a new escape route. The government watched in alarm. The flow of people was growing once again, and this time, it was happening in front of the entire world. The leadership was running out of options. Protests were spreading. Citizens were demanding change. And the wall that had once symbolized strength was becoming a symbol of weakness. What nobody knew was that events were moving toward a dramatic conclusion, a conclusion that would arrive much sooner than anyone expected. Because on November 9, 1989, a government spokesman would walk into a press conference carrying a set of documents he barely had time to read. And those documents contained the spark that would ignite history. As dawn broke over Berlin on November 10, 1989, the world woke up to scenes that seemed impossible. People stood on top of the wall. Strangers embraced. Families reunited after decades apart. The barrier that had divided a city for 28 years was no longer feared. It was being celebrated. In the weeks that followed, East Germany's communist government rapidly lost its grip on power. Within a year, Germany was reunited, and soon after, the Cold War itself began to come to an end. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is how it happened. The Berlin Wall did not fall because a foreign army invaded. It did not fall because world leaders gathered around a negotiating table. And it did not fall because the East German government planned for it. Instead, the wall collapsed because an aging system was already breaking under enormous pressure. For years, millions of people had demanded freedom. For years, they had challenged fear, surveillance, and division. The mistake made on November 9th did not create that desire. It simply revealed a truth that could no longer be hidden. The government had lost control, and once the people realized it, there was no turning back. A single sentence sparked the chaos, but it was the courage of millions that changed history. Today, only fragments of the Berlin Wall remain, scattered pieces of concrete preserved in museums and memorials around the world. They stand as reminders of a divided past, a reminder of what happens when governments build walls between people, and a reminder that even the strongest barriers can fall when enough people demand freedom. Because in the end, the Berlin Wall did not fall in a war. It did not fall in a revolution. It fell in a single night. And it all began with a mistake that changed history in a matter of hours. For 28 years, the Berlin Wall stood as a symbol of division. But on one extraordinary night, in 1989, millions of ordinary people proved a simple truth. No wall can stand forever when the people behind it stop believing in it.